There are people in this world who don't need to speak in order to leave a deep impression. They don't try to stand out. They don't seek the spotlight. And yet somehow they reveal truths that others weren't ready to see. Without trying to provoke change, they silently trigger profound transformations in the hearts and minds of those who come close. It's not something they do consciously. It's just something they are. These individuals become mirrors, not in the superficial sense of merely reflecting appearances, but in a much deeper, more soul-stirring way. They confront others with the parts of themselves that they either don't want to see or have buried so deeply they can no longer reach them. Carl Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, and some souls, by simply being, ignite that inner process in those around them. They are not teachers in the traditional sense. They don't teach through words or lectures. They teach through vibration, through presence. Their energy speaks louder than any sermon. They are energetic mirrors. Perhaps no one has ever told you this before. Maybe you haven't even fully realized it yourself. But if you've noticed lately that your mere presence seems to shift conversations, provoke honesty, or make people act differently without you doing anything at all, then it's very possible you are one of those mirrors. And it's not an easy role, because being a mirror doesn't only mean reflecting light. It also means reflecting shadow. And not everyone is ready to face their shadow. Some resist it. Some push it away. One of the first signs that you are this type of mirror is that people change when they're near you, and you can't quite explain why. It's not about what you say or do. It's something more subtle, more profound. You may have noticed that some people feel incredibly calm and at peace in your presence, while others become restless, nervous, even agitated, without any apparent reason. You remain silent, watching this shift, quietly wondering what it means. Over time, you start to see a pattern. It doesn't matter how neutral you try to be. Your presence alone amplifies whatever others carry within them. If someone is holding on to anxiety, it heightens near you. If someone is carrying unexpressed sadness, it begins to surface just by being in your proximity. And if someone has disconnected so much from themselves that they no longer feel at all, your energy, without any conscious effort, confronts them with that numbness. This can be deeply uncomfortable, because even though you say nothing, something in you causes people to either lower their defenses or raise them sky high. Not because you seek confrontation, but because your energy is like a clean mirror, unfiltered, unadorned. And for those who live behind masks or illusions, such clarity can feel like too much to bear. Jung also said that we meet ourselves in the other, and you, perhaps unknowingly, are that other for many people. Without intending to, without seeking attention, you become the reflection point, where hidden truths begin to surface. Not because you point them out with your words, but because your being holds space for what is real. Your presence is so in tune with truth that it leaves little room for self-deception. You might have wondered why people confide in you out of nowhere, why they tell you things they've never told anyone, or why they start crying in your presence without even knowing why. That's not a coincidence. It's resonance. Your energy field opens emotional doors that others couldn't open on their own. And in those moments, truth peeks out. Not because you demand it, but because your vibration makes it feel safe enough to emerge. And even though this has left you feeling emotionally drained at times, you're beginning to understand something vital. It's not that you absorb others' emotions, it's that you awaken them. Your frequency no longer tolerates falsehoods, superficial relationships, or connections that deny what is essential. You have become a catalyst, a mirror that simply by being reflects whatever needs to be seen. Yes, this path has come with its own costs, misunderstandings, rejections, unexplained distances from people who once felt close. But you're no longer punishing yourself for that. You're beginning to accept that not everyone is ready to see themselves clearly. And you weren't born to soften that reflection, just to make others feel more comfortable. You were born to hold that mirror with love, even when others aren't ready to recognize what they see. And maybe, just maybe, that's your silent gift to the world. There is a second, deeper sign that often goes unnoticed, but reveals something profound about your energy and your purpose in this world. People project emotions onto you that don't belong to you. Have you ever found yourself unexpectedly caught in the emotional storms of others? Without doing anything in particular, you suddenly become the target of someone's misplaced anger, the unwilling confidant of secrets you never asked to hear, or the silent container of someone else's frustration, pain, or confusion. It's as if something within you, something unspoken, makes others feel they can unload their emotional weight in your presence. Carl Jung once taught that what we deny within ourselves, we unconsciously project onto the outside world. And you, often without realizing it, have become that outside world for many people. You're the screen onto which they cast the parts of themselves they're unable or unwilling to face. But it's not just close friends or family members who project onto you. Sometimes it's strangers, people who've barely exchanged a word with you, co-workers who don't really know you, or casual acquaintances who for some reason feel an intense reaction to your presence. You've started to realize that there's something in your energetic field, something subtle yet powerful, that awakens dormant emotions in others, emotions that have long been buried, denied, or hidden away. You've probably asked yourself more than once, am I doing something wrong? Is it the way I speak, the way I walk into a room? Is there something about my presence that provokes these responses? But over time, you've come to a powerful realization. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are. It's the vibration you carry. You've come to understand that your very presence becomes a kind of energetic mirror, a channel for emotional release in those who have no idea how to deal with their own inner chaos. And yes, it often feels unfair. You're not responsible for the emotional baggage of others, and yet you seem to attract it, carry it, absorb it, until now. Because now, with deeper awareness, you see that it isn't personal. It's energetic. Jung described projection as a psychological defense mechanism, something people do unconsciously to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. And without intending to, you become that mirror, reflecting not only their wounds, but also the untapped potential they're not ready to claim. This is why people sometimes put you on a pedestal, seeing in you an idealized version of themselves, one they admire, perhaps even envy. But that same dynamic can flip in an instant. They may later resent you, criticize you harshly, or accuse you of things you know are not true. Because in truth, their reaction is never really about you. It's about the parts of themselves they've yet to accept. What's remarkable is that you've started to recognize this pattern. And even though it can be emotionally exhausting, you also sense that there's an opportunity hidden within it. Each projection, each emotional outburst directed at you, is also an invitation for the other person to wake up, to look within, to recognize their own story in the reflection you provide. And you, by remaining grounded in your own center, by not absorbing their chaos or reacting from your own wounds. Become a stabilizing force. You become a vessel of transformation. This is not easy. You've cried tears that were not yours. You've carried the heaviness of feelings that didn't originate in your own heart. But you're beginning to realize something profound. You can reflect without absorbing. You can hold space without carrying the weight. You can remain present without losing yourself in someone else's emotional narrative. And with this newfound understanding, you are becoming free. Because the more clearly you see that what others see in you is often a projection of themselves, the more lightly you can move through the world. You don't have to internalize their emotions anymore. You don't have to take responsibility for their unresolved wounds. You're still the mirror, yes. But now, you're a mirror that no longer forgets its own reflection. Even more, you've come to understand that these projections, however intense or draining, carry encoded messages. Every time someone directs disproportionate anger toward you, or showers you with unwarranted praise, or resists your presence, or rejects you without cause, you know with clarity, this is not about me. It's about something in them that they haven't yet faced. It's about something they've pushed into the shadows of their psyche, something they don't yet know how to process. And instead of reacting, defending yourself, explaining, or trying to be understood, you've learned to hold space with calmness and neutrality. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself or to be validated. You've come to understand that your role as an energetic mirror is not to argue or convince anyone. It is simply to reflect. And sometimes, reflection provokes discomfort. It stirs resistance. It brings up fear, grief, shame, anger. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your vibration exposes what others are not ready to see. As Jung wisely said, what we do not bring into consciousness appears in our lives as fate, as enemies, obstacles, conflicts, and often, without even realizing it, you've become the face of that fate for others, the person onto whom they cast their disowned parts. You've been the screen on which others project their fears, their unmet needs, their unfulfilled dreams. And yes, it has drained you at times. It has made you question your path, your relationships, your very identity. But now you know. You can reflect without becoming confused. You can see the storm around you without becoming the storm itself. You are learning to stay rooted in your own truth, even when others try to hand you their emotional chaos. You are learning to be the clear space where truth can arise, where others might for a moment catch a glimpse of who they really are, even if they deny it, even if they blame you for the discomfort they feel in your presence. And through this silent holding, through this quiet strength, you are growing stronger. You no longer fragment yourself in an attempt to be liked. You no longer dilute your essence just to be more acceptable. You understand now that those who are ready to truly see themselves will find a sacred opportunity in your presence, and those who aren't will see you as a threat, a trigger, an uncomfortable mirror. And both are okay, because your role is not to be comfortable for others. Your role is to be true to the frequency you've come here to embody. You are not here to soften your light so others can stay in the dark. You are here to shine it fully, to reflect without fear, to embody your energy unapologetically. In doing so, you give others a choice, not to follow you, not to admire you, not to agree with you, but to turn inward and meet themselves. And that, more than anything, is what makes you powerful. Third sign, people feel emotionally exposed around you, even when you haven't said a single word. You've probably noticed how, in your presence, conversations naturally take a deeper turn. Defenses come down, silences become meaningful, and somehow your energy alone seems to invite others to shed the superficial and step into emotional territory they may have avoided for years. Carl Jung taught that the soul recognizes where it can be seen without judgment, and unknowingly, you've become that safe space where authenticity is allowed to surface. You've realized you don't have to force conversations or lead people into depth. Just the way you exist, the way you look at others, your quiet presence, it's enough to invite masks to fall away. Even people who usually protect themselves behind stories and facades end up opening up to you, as if their soul had long been waiting for such a space. And it's not because you're doing anything special. It's because you resonate at a frequency where only the real things survive. You've stopped engaging in empty conversations, stopped playing along with shallow dynamics, and quit validating what doesn't feel true to you. That energetic coherence is felt, even if it's not consciously understood. It's sensed, even if it can't be explained. Jung also said that the collective unconscious recognizes the places where it can emerge without danger. And you are one of those places now, because your energy no longer tries to manipulate, correct, or please. It simply holds. You hold the silence. You hold the pain. You hold the vulnerability of others without trying to cover it up, fix it, or fill it with unnecessary advice. And in that clear, non-intrusive presence, others feel the permission to be just as they are. Permission they may have never received before. Permission that maybe you were once denied too. And that's exactly why you can now offer it freely, without conditions. That ability to create openness without any conscious effort is one of the clearest signs that you're an energetic mirror. People, without even knowing why, feel they can release with you. They can cry without fear. They can finally speak what they've never dared to say. And you, without invading, without judging, without taking on their burdens, hold space like an invisible altar where each person meets their true self. And even though it's sometimes exhausting to be that point of emotional opening for others, you now understand. It's not your role to intervene in everything that comes up. Your job is simply to allow it to emerge. You're learning not to absorb other people's emotions, not to feel responsible for what they discover in themselves through you. Your task isn't to carry their processes, it's to sustain your own presence. And that, though quiet, is deeply transformative. You've also come to understand that the openness you generate isn't always welcomed with gratitude. There are people who, after being vulnerable with you, feel fear, shame, or even anger, because in opening up, they touch parts of themselves that have been buried for a long time. And although you never try to expose them, just your presence reveals what they've tried to keep hidden. Jung said the soul doesn't always thank the mirror right away. Often, it needs time to process what it saw. And you've learned to honor that time. You no longer expect to be understood, appreciated, or acknowledged for what your presence awakens in others. You know it's not about you. It's just a natural process. When people see themselves clearly, they often need to pull back to integrate what they've seen. And you understand now that this retreat isn't a rejection of you. It's a confrontation with themselves. You've learned not to take it as something to fix or as a blow to your self-worth. You understand that when you activate that energetic mirror, some people will stay, others will walk away, and some will deny what they saw entirely. And all of those responses are valid. Your job isn't to retain, to convince, or to push. It's to remain grounded in your own energetic truth, even if that means standing alone in certain spaces, even if it means letting go of relationships that can't meet you in that depth. And though it may hurt, you recognize it's the price of living from what's real, because you can't go back, not to places where masks are the norm, where evasion is the language, where disconnection is the way of life. You've chosen, through every conscious act, through every silent letting go, to be that space where the soul feels safe enough to show itself, even if it separates you from those who aren't ready to do the same. And that choice has made you strong. It has made you clear. It has made you a mirror and a channel for something greater than yourself. Fourth sign. People come to you when they need clarity, but often drift away when they're not ready to hold that clarity. You've noticed that during moments of crisis, confusion, or inner chaos, they turn to you. They confide in you. They unload their inner world. But when the reflection you offer shows them truths they're not yet prepared to face, many walk away without saying a word. Carl Jung once said that the unconscious desperately seeks mirrors, but also flees from them when they reveal what the mind is unable to process. You are that mirror, and you've felt this again and again. You've also come to recognize that this dynamic repeats itself with different faces, at different times, and in various contexts. People who once seemed comfortable with your presence suddenly feel uneasy, create distance, vanish without a clear reason. Not because you've changed, but because the reflection you offer has become too honest, too raw, too confronting for those not yet ready to see themselves at that depth. And although it used to hurt you at first, although you questioned whether you were doing something wrong, now you understand it's not personal. It's simply the soul's natural reaction when it stands before its bare truth. You've learned to release those disconnections without clinging to unnecessary pain, without staying trapped in explanations that only drain your energy, because you now understand the mirror isn't responsible for what others see. It's only the reflection. Carl Jung said that what we deny in ourselves ends up destroying us from within, but when we dare to recognize it in another, we open a door to integration. And you are that door for many, not because you intend to be, but because you can no longer resonate with superficiality. Your energetic field has become so finely tuned that it no longer holds space for what's false, manipulated, or distorted. And in that clarity, those who seek you during times of confusion often end up running away when what they see in you is a reflection of their own misalignment. You've come to understand that not everyone wants clarity. Some only want validation, temporary companionship, emotional distraction, and you can no longer offer that because your presence, without even trying, demands authenticity. It calls the other person to look themselves in the eye. And not everyone is willing to stand in that reflection. But you've chosen not to dim your clarity to make others comfortable, not to lower your frequency to become more palatable, because you know that those who are ready to stand in your reflection will find a sacred space within you, and those who aren't are also entitled to their own process, their own timing, their own distance. You in silence, without expectations, without the need to hold anyone back. Allow everything to flow as it must, because you've learned that being a mirror means letting others see themselves when they're ready. Not before, not through pressure, not from lack, You've also come to understand that your role as a mirror is not measured by how long others stay in your life, but by the transformation you activate in them, even from afar. Have you noticed how, after those intense encounters, those seemingly brief connections, many people return sometime later with a different look in their eyes, a different way of speaking, a new openness? They don't always say it. They don't always thank you, but you feel it. Something shifted within them, and that's part of your silent mission. Not to be a guide, not to be a teacher, not to be a lighthouse, but to be a mirror, a clear, coherent, available mirror, with no need for the other to understand the reflection at the exact moment they receive it. You've learned to honor others' processes, even when they walk away from you, misinterpret you, or project their unresolved wounds onto you. Carl Jung said that the soul reflects itself in another, not when it wants to, but when it is ready. And by standing firmly in your truth, without demands, without expectations, without chasing instant results, you allow that alchemy to unfold at the perfect time for each person. You've let go of the need to be chosen. You've released the burden of maintaining connections that only survive when you dim your light, when you minimize your clarity, when you agree to be what you are not. And now you understand that being a mirror also means holding the emptiness when it's needed. It means respecting the distance. It means knowing that rejection is not rejection of you, but rejection of the reflection they're not yet ready to inhabit. And that has freed you, because you no longer need everyone to stay. You only need to remain true to your essence, knowing that those who are ready will come closer, and those who aren't will continue on their path until life shows them other mirrors, other truths, other opportunities. You're beginning to understand that being an energetic mirror is not a comfortable task, but it is a deeply transformative one. For them, for you, and for a world that needs more people willing to reflect without disguise. The fifth sign, your mere presence, has the power to harmonize or disrupt the energy of a space, without any conscious effort on your part. Have you noticed how, simply by walking into a room, something shifts? The atmosphere changes, tensions are stirred or released, and what was being held in silence suddenly finds expression. It's not that you're doing anything deliberately, it's simply that your energy field speaks louder than words ever could. It's as if your presence acts like an invisible tuning fork, silently recalibrating the energies of the space you enter. Without intending to, you restore what was misaligned and bring to light what others were subconsciously ignoring. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious as a vast interconnected network, where even unspoken realities ripple through unseen threads. You, whether you're aware of it or not, have become a kind of energetic node, a catalyst for transformation, awakening what needs to move. You've probably started to notice it more clearly now. You no longer need to speak or take action for the environment around you to shift. Just by entering, frequencies start to change. You've walked into rooms so thick with unspoken tension that the air felt heavy, only to see that tension either erupt or dissolve moments after your arrival, without saying a single word. It's as though your energy carries with it a vibration that disrupts what's stagnant, accelerates what has been suppressed, and illuminates what others were trying to hide. Even when you don't understand why this happens, you've begun to recognize it as a part of your energetic nature. You are like a subtle activator, an unconscious trigger of movement in spaces that have long remained dormant. Not because you intend to be, but because you operate from a frequency that refuses to let anything misaligned remain in shadow for too long. Jung often taught that what remains hidden in the unconscious will eventually manifest in the external world until someone has the courage to name it, to acknowledge it, and bring it into consciousness. And more often than not, you are that someone. Not by pointing fingers or making declarations, but simply by being. Your presence alone nudges what is unbalanced toward a new alignment. It's a quiet but profound power, one that has likely made you feel out of place in more than a few situations. Some people may see you as a threat, not because of anything you've done, but because of the emotional or energetic reactions you unintentionally provoke. Your energy doesn't support illusions anymore. It no longer allows denial to be used as a hiding place. You are no longer the person who dims their light to make others feel more comfortable. You've tried that before, softening your presence, shrinking your vibration, hoping not to disturb. But now you understand that to do so is to betray yourself. You've come to see that remaining true to your own center, anchored in stillness, is not only your right, it's your calling. And now, you let people respond as they will. Those who are ready will find resonance and healing in your frequency. Those who aren't will feel shaken, even destabilized, and you've learned to let them go without bitterness. You did not come here to control the outcome, or to mold yourself into a version that makes everyone else feel comfortable. You came to remember, and to help others remember, by embodying the truth that sometimes disorder is a sacred part of a greater order. Chaos, when held with awareness, becomes alchemy. That is how you walk now. Not as someone who seeks to fix or to please, but as someone who carries the medicine of presence. Your vibration is a remedy for some, and an uncomfortable mirror for others, but always an authentic reflection of the frequency your soul has chosen to maintain. You've also come to understand that this ability to harmonize or disrupt doesn't stem from your mood or intentions. It's not something you choose to activate. It just happens, because your energetic field has reached a level of inner coherence that can't tolerate inconsistency around it without causing motion. You've reached a vibration so aligned with truth that anything untrue begins to unravel in your presence. It's as if your very being carries forgotten codes, silent reminders that awaken others from their slumber. You've entered places that felt stuck in hollow routines, where conversation was shallow, gestures were automatic, and energy was stale. And yet, the moment you stepped in, everything began to shift. Not because you said anything provocative, but because you arrived carrying the subtle but powerful vibration of truth. The energy of the unspoken question. The presence that cannot pretend. And even if it's not always understood, it is always felt. Jung reminded us that everything unconscious seeks the light, and often you are the vessel through which that light begins to filter, uninvited, unannounced. As it flows through, what was buried surfaces, what was frozen begins to thaw, and what was held together by habit collapses, making way for something more real. But you're no longer afraid of this role. In the past, perhaps you tried to blend in, to minimize your impact, to avoid disturbing the surface. But now you know that your vibration is not here to accommodate. It's here to awaken. And awakening, by its nature, is rarely comfortable, but it is always necessary, because those who choose to stay after the initial disruption, the ones who remain even after the old walls start to crack, are the ones who are truly ready, ready to build something honest, ready to step into alignment. And those who leave will do so on their own time, with their own lessons. You no longer chase after them. You no longer cling. Because now you know your presence was never meant to hold anyone back. It was meant to activate what was dormant, to unlock inner doors that only open when someone dares to reflect what others refuse to see. And in being that mirror, you continue to see more of yourself, to remember who you are, to refine your own path. Because even the clearest mirror must remain true to its own reflection. Even those who reflect must still learn how to see. Being an energetic mirror is not a role you consciously chose. It is a silent calling from your soul, a sacred responsibility that has made you a catalyst, an activator, a living space of transformation where the unseen becomes seen. And though that path is not easy, you've chosen to walk it with integrity. You refuse to betray yourself. You no longer force yourself to fit into places that no longer match your frequency. Jung once reminded us that when an individual becomes a mirror, they must also learn to hold themselves with love, with boundaries, with deep awareness. Because the mirror does not absorb, it reflects. It does not drag, it reveals. It does not carry, it holds space, firmly rooted in its own center. And that's what you're learning to do now, to inhabit your center with a quiet kind of dignity, one that doesn't need to shout to be heard, one that transforms by simply being. If these words resonated with something deep inside you, if you felt as though each sentence named something you could never quite explain, it's because you've already become aware of the frequency you carry. And if you wish to continue walking in your truth, embracing that silent power within you, then keep listening. Here, the soul doesn't just speak, it reflects. Here, those who are ready find the mirror their spirit has been longing to see. You're not here by accident. Something deep within you led you to this video at precisely this moment, and when you finish watching it, you'll understand why. There are times in life when we feel small, insignificant, as if our role in this vast world is limited or invisible. And yet, there are also moments, unexpected, unexplainable, when life begins to reveal something far greater. You begin to sense that your presence, your existence, has been fulfilling a purpose far deeper than what you ever imagined. It's not about ego. It's something that emerges from the soul. Carl Jung once said that true self-realization begins when a person aligns with a purpose greater than themselves. And whether or not you can describe it, you're beginning to live that process. You may not fully understand what's happening yet, but something inside you already knows. Let's start with this. People open up to you as if they've known you for a long time. Strangers, friends, even those who barely speak to others, they come to you and suddenly begin to share things they've carried for years in silence. You don't ask for it, you don't chase it, but it happens. And they don't come to you because of your academic knowledge or because of something you've achieved on the outside. They come because of the way you make them feel. Your presence has a way of making people feel seen, heard, understood. Sometimes you don't even need to say a word. Your simple presence is enough. And in that presence, something shifts. They relax. They breathe easier. They let go. The tension they carried melts, and they don't always know why, but you do, because you felt this happen again and again. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, you feel a strange and peaceful calm, as if you've always known what others need, even before they do. This isn't because you have all the answers, it's because you hold space for the answers to emerge naturally. That ability of yours didn't come from books or training. It came from something much deeper. You've been cultivating a certain kind of energy without even realizing it. A vibration. One that doesn't lead from above, but from beside. It doesn't instruct. It allows. You never announced yourself as a healer. You never said, "I'm here to help." But life knows. The souls around you recognize it, even if they don't understand it. You're not playing a higher role in the traditional sense. You're fulfilling something sacred. You're learning how to accompany others without taking control, to understand without judgment, to hold space without directing. And that is rare. The way others open up to you is not a coincidence. It's a reflection of something deeper inside of you. Your soul has begun to emit a frequency that others feel even if they can't explain it. It's as if, somewhere beyond the physical, you carry a message written into your being. It doesn't need to be spoken, but others feel it. They recognize it. They feel like they've come home. It's not what you say. It's what you radiate. You don't go around announcing this, because even you don't fully understand how it works. You just know that when someone is with you, they soften, they surrender, they start to breathe in a new way. They speak of things they hadn't even admitted to themselves. And instead of feeling burdened, you stay. You remain grounded, honest, still. You don't rush to fix them. You don't try to give them answers. You just hold space. A space that feels safe, real, clear. And that kind of presence is rare. It reveals that you are serving a much higher function than you ever believed. You start to realize something important. You don't need to have a perfect life in order to support others. You don't need to have all the answers to guide someone. You don't need to be in control to inspire trust. What you're doing isn't helping in the traditional sense. You're reminding people of who they are, simply by not forgetting who you are. You've stopped filling silences with noise, and in that silence, you've started to carry emotional processes that others couldn't hold on their own. Not because you're stronger, but because you're clearer. That inner clarity you've cultivated has become a shelter for those still lost in confusion. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes that move beyond personality, living forces that work through us when we align with something larger than ourselves. You've begun to embody one of those forces, a presence that doesn't need a name, a role that isn't defined by society. You are support without structure. You are comfort without credentials. You are space without a script. And that is one of the most sacred roles a soul can fulfill. To simply be the place where another human being can finally let go of what they've been holding in silence. To be the presence where there is no judgment, no correction, no evaluation, just being. And in that presence, something extraordinary happens. They return to themselves, not because of what you said or what you did, but because you were there, fully, genuinely, just being, signaled to. There comes a moment in your journey when you begin to realize something remarkable, that many of the decisions you once believed were impulsive or irrational were in truth directed by a force far greater than your own logic. You look back and notice how certain steps you took, ones that seemed reckless or inexplicable at the time, were in fact divinely aligned. Moments of departure you couldn't explain, choices that defied common sense, changes that seemed devoid of reason, all of them now, through the lens of your soul, begin to make perfect sense. Because now you see the map, the one you couldn't see before. Every move, no matter how uncertain or painful, placed you exactly where you needed to be. And it wasn't your conscious mind that orchestrated it. You didn't design this plan with spreadsheets or goals. It was your frequency, your vibration, responding to an invisible signal, a pull that had no blueprint, no guarantees, no promises, just direction. And you followed it, often unknowingly, but always faithfully. Carl Jung spoke of the self, that higher part of us that guides our life's deepest movements, often beyond the grasp of our ego. And now, you're beginning to distinguish the subtle, yet powerful difference between when it was your ego making the decisions and when it was your soul leading the way. With this awareness comes a profound realization. You're not here by coincidence. You didn't become who you are by accident. You've walked through the fire. You've endured loss, heartbreak, disconnection, not as random events, but as sacred initiations. Every fracture you experienced, every empty space you learned to sit in, every unexpected change was constructing something within you. A vast, silent space inside that has become your greatest strength. What once felt like breaking was actually shaping. What once felt like abandonment was actually a return to yourself. You no longer see your hardships as failures. You see them as preparation, as quiet, divine training. You no longer ask, "Why me?" Because now you understand. It had to be you. Your energy had to learn how to stand alone, how to hold its own, so that one day you could hold space for others, not from a place of martyrdom, but from a place of conscious presence. Everything that once appeared to be chaos now reveals itself as part of a divine order. It's as if life was secretly preparing you, guiding you toward a higher role, one far beyond what your rational mind could conceive. A role that requires no certificates, no applause, only the courage to survive yourself, to go deep within and meet the truth of who you are without distraction. And the recognition that comes with this, it's not one of pride, it's one of humility. Because you know, this was never your plan. Your mind didn't lead the way. You were led. You were emptied of what you thought you needed, so you could carry only what was essential. You had to become light enough to hold the weight of your own truth. And now you understand why you had to let go of so much, why you had to be broken open. You now see that the places where it hurt the most were the ones that taught you how to hold yourself from within. The connections that fell apart taught you not to cling. The sacrifices you made without knowing why were acts of deep, invisible loyalty to a purpose that hadn't yet been revealed. And now, when someone asks how you made it through, you don't have a straight answer, because you didn't know you were making it through. You just followed something inside you that refused to settle, even when you couldn't name it. Now, with the clarity of this new consciousness, you realize that all of it, the confusion, the pain, the solitude, was part of a divine design you couldn't perceive at the time. But from where you stand now, you see the delicate threads. The map was always there, just invisible, woven by a force that is not yours to control, but also not yours to doubt. You don't need to understand it fully, you can feel its truth. Carl Jung once said, "What is not made conscious will be lived as fate." And now, you're making that fate conscious. You're realizing that your role was never small. It was simply waiting for you to be quiet enough inside to hear it. And this awareness that's blooming within you doesn't need outside approval. You no longer seek validation or recognition. You no longer crave understanding. You've learned to trust the feeling inside that says, "This is right," even if no one else understands it. That certainty doesn't come from reason. It comes from resonance, from the vibration you've refined through every storm, every loss, Every silent night when you rebuilt yourself without a script, without applause, without witnesses. While the world around you crumbled, something deeper was forming, something that today you recognize not as an achievement, but as a sacred responsibility. You no longer see yourself as someone just trying to make sense of life. You now know you're here to hold a frequency that not everyone can hold. Not because you're better, but because you refuse to shut down when it would have been easier to harden. You chose to feel when numbing would have been safer. And that invisible choice made all the difference. That's what made you a vessel, a channel, a mirror, a grounding presence. You've started to notice that when you're present, things align around you. Not because you're forcing anything, but because your energy carries coherence. When you speak, it's not the voice of someone who knows. It's the voice of someone who remembers. And people can feel it. They may not know what it is, but they feel the shift. They feel the invitation to return to themselves. Jung also said that when the soul aligns with its deepest center, it begins to operate from a place the mind cannot dominate. And you've arrived there. That place where your energy does more than your words, where your story becomes medicine, even if it's never told, where your mere presence reorders the room, uplifts others, transmits a truth that needs no explanation. You don't advertise it, you don't label it, but you know. You know it without knowing how. You know it because you feel it, because you see it reflected in the eyes of those who come near, those who cry in your presence without understanding why. That is the role you're now fulfilling. Not one measured by status or metrics, but by the authenticity with which you occupy your inner space. And you are occupying it now like never before. No masks, no fragments, no decoration. Just you, as a pure channel for something far greater than yourself, something that chose to move through you. And in allowing that force to pass through you, you've come to understand the true essence of service. It's not about doing more, it's about being more. Being a clear space where the purest part of you can touch others without interference, without expectation, without the need for praise or outcome, simply holding the vibration you've earned through all your inner work, the work no one saw, but everyone now feels. You didn't ask to hold this higher role. Life handed it to you. Life trusted you with it through experiences you didn't know you could survive, but you did. And while surviving, you were aligning, quietly, steadily, unshakably. Now, you no longer doubt your intuition. When your body tells you something isn't right, you listen. You no longer force connections where your energy doesn't flow. You've stopped explaining your sensitivity to those who label it strange. You've remembered that what you are doesn't need justification. It needs integrity. And integrity has become your way of being. Not because you're trying, but because you simply can't live any other way without betraying yourself. As Jung said, the soul falls ill when it disconnects from its center, and you have chosen to stay in yours, even if that meant walking away from familiarity, dismantling internal structures, and walking alone through long stretches of the path. But now you see that solitude was preparation. That emptiness was expansion. That silence was a language. And now, from that language, you speak, even without words. You heal, even without touch. You inspire, even without trying. You don't call it a mission. You don't name it purpose. You simply live it, like breath, like stillness, like someone who is exactly where they need to be. Because there is nowhere else they could be. And if you ever doubted your importance, your impact, your place in the vast, invisible fabric of the collective soul, now you begin to feel it. You don't need to be seen from above to be fulfilling a high role. You just need to be where truth isn't compromised, where energy isn't masked, where your presence doesn't perform. It simply transforms. Because sometimes the highest role is not the most visible one. It's the most coherent. And you are already there. Signal 3. Your sensitivity is no longer just a trait. It has become your most accurate compass. You've noticed that you perceive before you understand, that you feel before you define, that something within you picks up the vibration of things, of spaces, of people, even before anything visible happens. And the most surprising part? You no longer question it. You no longer need anyone else to validate your perception, because you've learned to trust that sensitivity as an essential part of the higher role you're beginning to fulfill. You no longer see your sensitivity as a weakness. Now you know it's deep perception. It's a language that comes before words. It's a direct connection to what others cannot register. And that connection is a form of guidance. Carl Jung said that those who haven't explored their own depths can hardly accompany another into theirs. And you've descended into your own depths many times. You've walked through emotional landscapes that most avoid. You've inhabited nameless voids. You've withstood storms without anyone knowing. That's why now, when someone shatters in front of you, you're not afraid, because you recognize that place, because you've been there. And since you've journeyed through it, you can accompany others without judgment. Since you've felt it, you can hold space without intruding. Your sensitivity allows you to read between the lines, to perceive what isn't being said, to detect the emotional tone of a room before a single word is spoken. And you do it effortlessly, not because you learned it, but because it's your natural way of being. And this way of being, quiet, respectful, profound, is part of the higher role you now embody. It's a guidance that needs no words, a presence that seeks no validation. You're beginning to understand that your sensitivity doesn't separate you. It connects you. It doesn't make you weaker. It makes you more precise. And in a world where so much is masked, someone who feels without self-deception is medicine. That sensitivity you once tried to hide, to minimize, or to explain away has now become your most sacred treasure. Because you've realized not everyone can hold what you feel, but you can hold what others aren't yet ready to face. And you don't do it from logic. You do it from a vibration that's become so precise that even the slightest misalignment in someone else's energy field, you already sensed it. It's an internal pulse, a silent alert, a certainty that doesn't pass through the mind. And that certainty isn't invasive. It doesn't make you interfere. It makes you dwell with greater awareness. You've learned that feeling isn't the same as carrying, that perceiving doesn't mean solving, and that your sensitivity doesn't demand constant action, only that you stay present in a clearer, cleaner, more honest way. Now, you know that what you feel is real. You don't need external proof to validate your perception. Because when something doesn't resonate with you, even if everything on the outside seems perfect, you know it. And when something does resonate, it doesn't matter if it lacks form. You recognize it. Carl Jung said, "The soul knows what it needs long before reason understands it." And you've started living from that knowing. That's why your sensitivity now guides your decisions. It tells you which bonds to open, which spaces to close, which paths to walk, and which energies to avoid, without guilt, without justification, without explanation. You no longer ask permission to protect your energy. You no longer force your presence where your soul shrinks. You no longer give your attention to what doesn't honor you vibrationally. And that, even if invisible, is a form of leadership. Because leadership isn't always about speaking loudly. Sometimes it's about standing firm in subtlety, staying whole in the unseen. And you've learned to turn that subtlety into a channel, a compass, a medicine, a vibrational act of love. Now you know that feeling is your language, and that your way of feeling so deeply, so precisely, is part of what you came here to offer. Not with effort, not with noise, only with truth. Signal 4. You've started to notice that you don't fit into any fixed structure because your energy came to support a space that didn't exist before. You're not the typical leader, nor the traditional guide. You don't follow the expected paths, nor do you speak the way people are supposed to. And while for a long time that made you feel out of place, now you're starting to understand. You're not here to fit in. You're here to open a new space. Your presence doesn't replicate templates. The way you support, accompany, and live is unique. And every time you tried to force yourself to follow a script, something inside you cracked a little. Because you didn't come to repeat. You came to embody something different. You felt it in groups, in systems, in environments where everyone operated from a learned pattern, and you simply couldn't. Not because you didn't know how, but because your soul no longer cooperates with what's fake, forced, or copied. You don't shape yourself to appear. You shape yourself to resonate. And even if that's not always understood from the outside, it's a clear sign you're fulfilling a role that transcends formats. You are a living frequency that can't be confined to labels. You've learned to step away from places where belonging meant abandoning parts of yourself. Now, you choose solitude over inner division. And in that gesture, which may look simple from the outside, lies deep meaning. Because by not forcing yourself into any structure, you've begun to create your own, to hold space that didn't exist until you inhabited it with your truth. And because of that, others are beginning to arrive, not because you call them, but because they feel in you a different way of being, one that doesn't impose, doesn't demand, doesn't judge. They know there's something real in your way. And even if they don't fully understand it, they recognize it. This new space you're holding, even without a name or form, is already doing its work. Without campaigns, without plans, without needing explanation. It's your way of being in the world, with silent coherence that's creating change. Not the visible kind, not the kind that's immediate or celebrated, but the kind that moves subtly through the soul of those who watch you in silence, who breathe with you, who dare to feel your presence. Because you don't teach with words, you teach through how you are, through how you choose, through the way you protect your energy, not as defense, but as integrity, through the way you say no without hurting, through the way you choose calm, even if it distances you from everything that feels urgent. And in that quiet, firm, unique style, you're showing that there is another way, one that isn't written, but deeply felt, one that isn't learned, but remembered. For years, you felt like you didn't belong, that there was no place aligned with how you see, feel, or hold things. Now you understand. That was part of the design, because you didn't come to adapt. You came to embody something that didn't yet have form. And little by little, you've begun to shape that form through your truth, not with violence, not through imposition, but with presence. A presence that doesn't need a stage to have an impact, a presence that, without intending to, begins to resonate in others who also felt out of place. And in seeing you, in feeling you, they realize there are more like them. Your life, lived from your center, is already a message. Your coherence is structure. Your vibration is the space. And that thing that once seemed formless, that oddness you thought set you apart, is what now makes you a channel for something new. And you don't need to call anyone, because those who are meant to arrive will find their way to that space only you knew how to hold, even if you didn't know you were holding it. And the most profound part of all this is, you never had to explain it for it to work. Your field was already speaking. Before you even realized you were communicating. The way you withdrew, with love, was already a form of teaching. Your ability to say, "This is as far as I go," without bitterness, was a lesson for someone who never knew how to set boundaries. Your silence was a mirror, your way of being, a seed, your presence, a shelter. You've discovered that the thing that made you feel invisible was actually the reason you were chosen, to hold something that few can. Because only those who've lived on the margins can hold the center with humility. Only those who've been misunderstood can accompany without judgment. Only those who've been pushed aside can look at others without pretense. Now, all the things that once didn't seem to fit have become your medicine. The way you read a space before anything happens. The way your body closes without rational reason. The way you just know when to leave, when to stay, when to open up. That thing that seems strange is your vibrational precision. It's your unspoken mastery. And now you're starting to understand that you don't have to do something big to fulfill a high role. You have to be something deep. You have to be you, in your most refined, honest, sensitive form. And that part of you no one sees from the outside is holding changes others don't even know they need. You used to think you were invisible, but what you really are is irreplaceable, not because your ego needs it, but because your soul knows it. You've started to see how, without trying, your way of being has begun to shape others, not by imposing your truth, but by inhabiting it. That thing you do effortlessly, when you choose to stay with yourself, when you maintain your coherence, even if you're alone, when you don't sugarcoat your feelings just to make them digestible. That's what transforms the most. Because now you know you're fulfilling a higher role, not by what you do, but by what you hold. And what you hold is felt. Sign 5. You begin to notice something subtle but powerful. You no longer need approval to know you're on the right path. For a long time, you looked outside yourself for answers. You searched for signs, for validation, for someone, anyone, to tell you that you were doing well. You wanted a gesture, a nod, a word of reassurance. You craved confirmation that your steps were taking you in the right direction. But something has shifted. You no longer wait for applause. You're no longer hoping to be understood. You've stopped trying to explain yourself to the world. Because now your certainty doesn't come from the outside. It rises from within. It comes from a silent, steady, and unshakable place inside of you. A deep sense that even if no one sees it, even if no one acknowledges it, you are exactly where you are meant to be. And that realization doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you free. Free to move without permission. Free to be without needing translation. Free to hold your truth, even when no one else shares it. You've stopped doing things to please others. You've stopped speaking to convince. You've stopped proving your worth through demonstrations and accomplishments. Now, you act because it feels right. You speak because something within you needs expression. You stay because your energy sustains it. And in this way of being, so pure, so clean, so effortless, you begin to see clearly. What you came here to do doesn't need to be noticed to be real, because the deepest impact is not always measured in applause or reactions. It is measured in transformation. And you no longer measure yourself by what you accomplish. You measure yourself by what you are able to hold without losing yourself. You used to look for signs so you could trust. Now, you trust, and the signs appear. This is one of the clearest marks that you are fulfilling a higher role than you ever imagined. You don't need anyone to confirm it anymore, because now you know, you feel it, you are it, and this certainty that now lives inside you is not mental noise. It's not a learned affirmation. It's not something someone else told you. It's calm. It's that quiet sensation that appears when there's nothing left to prove, when your energy walks ahead of you, unapologetically, without justification. That's when you realize your path no longer needs to be explained. The way you live, the way you feel, the way you choose, even if it doesn't fit into conventional logic, is profoundly aligned with what your soul came here to sustain. And that kind of alignment is no longer up for debate. It's sacred. It's honored. You no longer need immediate results to feel confident. Now you know that everything you do, even if it doesn't create an echo in the external world, leaves a vibration, a silent imprint, a shift in the field, a quiet presence that reorganizes the space it touches, even if the world doesn't see it, even if there's no recognition. You've stopped chasing validation because you've remembered something crucial. Your guidance doesn't come from outside. It comes from how you inhabit yourself when no one is watching. It comes from the clarity with which you make decisions that no one else understands, but that you know deeply are part of something greater, something bigger than you, something you can't quite see yet, but you can feel with every cell in your body. And that loyalty to the invisible, that fierce fidelity to what's not yet manifest, is what carries you now. You don't need others to agree. You don't have to convince anyone. You no longer dim your light to make others comfortable. Because now you understand that when you walk from your truth, not everyone will be able to walk with you, but the path itself will align. And that, though it may seem intangible, is a form of leadership. A leadership that does not need a throne, or a spotlight, or an audience. It's the kind of leadership that operates from the soul, from vibration, from the silence that brings order. You made a decision to no longer betray yourself, and from that moment on, every one of your choices became an act of service. Every silence you keep is a sacred act. Every time you step back, it's a way to protect what is still growing. You've stopped moving forward for validation. Now you move forward out of coherence, out of alignment, and that has changed everything inside you. You no longer walk to be seen. Walking, for you, is enough, because now you understand that your true role is not something that needs to be named. It's something that is felt. It's something that is lived. You are already vibrating in that space. You don't need to know exactly what you're doing anymore, because your whole being already knows. And once you feel that knowing, you can't unfeel it. You're not who you once were, and you no longer need to become someone else. You are exactly where you're meant to be, embodying a higher role than your mind ever imagined, but one your soul always recognized. Your way of seeing, of choosing, of holding space, of withdrawing, of feeling. That is the message. That is the medicine. That is the path. A path others didn't even know existed until you made it inhabitable. And for that, for allowing yourself to recognize it, thank you. Thank you for staying true to yourself, especially in those moments when it would have been easier to betray your own essence. Thank you for holding on to the vibration of what's real, even when it had no name, even when no one else seemed to notice. If this message resonated with you, if something deep within you was ignited without needing words, I invite you to subscribe. I invite you to keep showing up in this space, a space where consciousness sees itself clearly, without masks, without filters. And don't forget to activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next moment of truth that might just change everything. You are not here by coincidence. Something deep within you led you to this video at this exact moment, and by the time you finish watching it, you'll begin to understand why. True healing doesn't always feel like a sudden burst of light. More often, it feels like a whisper in the middle of chaos, a quiet murmur that emerges not from the outside, not because something in your surroundings magically shifts, but from something internal, beginning to change, beginning to come together. Healing begins the moment you stop rejecting the parts of your story you once wanted to erase. It starts when you begin to integrate everything you've been, everything you've lived through, everything you've denied or tried to silence. Carl Jung once said that we don't transform by bringing light to the shadow, but by making the darkness conscious. And it's in that very process, silent, often invisible, where the true integration of the soul begins. And even if you're not fully aware of it yet, there are subtle but powerful signs that you're already healing from that deep place within. One of the first signs is that you stop fighting with yourself, not because you're trying to force peace or convince yourself that everything is okay, but because a quiet softness begins to settle in. It's a kind of silent understanding that allows you to observe yourself without judgment, to feel without demanding constant improvement, to live within yourself without needing to constantly fix or correct who you are. Your inner dialogue begins to change. You stop punishing yourself for feeling. You no longer pressure yourself to be perfect just to earn rest. Instead, you start speaking to yourself with honesty, but also with compassion. And that compassion is not weakness. It's a gentle kind of strength that begins to dismantle all the inner walls that once kept you separated from your true self. That softness doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in gradually with every decision you make in your own favor. With every moment you choose not to punish yourself for not having all the answers, for not healing fast enough, for not reacting the way you expected to. You begin to understand that real strength doesn't lie in being invulnerable. It lies in feeling everything and still moving forward, even when the wounds are still open. The internal war that once felt endless begins to quiet, not because everything has been resolved, but because you're no longer fighting against who you are. You begin to accept that you can feel anger without losing your essence, that you can feel fear and still take steps forward, that you can fail without becoming a failure. This kind of acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity. It's the deep realization that every emotion, every wound, every denied piece of yourself forms a crucial part of your soul's map. And when you allow all of it to coexist, when you give every part of yourself space to be, something sacred happens. A silent unification between who you were, who you are, and who you are becoming begins to take place. The demands you once placed on yourself start to lose their grip. The internal judgment fades, and in its place arises a more grounded presence, one that is more real, more firm, more human. You're no longer trying to become someone new. You're starting to truly inhabit yourself, and that, in itself, is already a powerful form of healing. It's a kind of healing that doesn't need visible rituals or dramatic revelations to be real. It shows up in your everyday life, in those moments when you might have once given up on yourself, and now, instead, you choose to stay. Not to fix everything immediately, but simply to stand by your side with dignity and patience. You begin to notice that pain no longer has the same power over you. It still appears, of course, but now it comes with a different rhythm, a different volume, a different texture. It doesn't drag you under anymore. It informs you. It no longer freezes your progress. It walks with you as you keep moving. And this happens because you've stopped rejecting pain. You've come to understand that pain is not your enemy. It is a part of your story that was still waiting to be heard. Your body feels this shift too. The chronic tensions you used to carry without even questioning them start to release, slowly but noticeably. Your breathing deepens without you forcing it. Your sleep becomes more restorative, not because your life has become weightless, but because you are finally carrying your burdens from a more integrated place, a place where you no longer have to abandon yourself just to survive. Emotions that once embarrassed you no longer feel like threats. They have become legitimate expressions of who you are, expressions you can now recognize without feeling the need to correct. You can be sad without thinking you're broken. You can feel insecure without doubting your worth. You can have a bad day without believing that you've regressed. That is one of the clearest signs that you're healing through integration. The ability to hold both your light and your shadow without rejecting either. You are no longer fragmenting yourself to be liked, nor are you denying your truth to fit in. Now, you walk with all that you are, with your contradictions, your emptiness, your quiet inner victories. And that wholeness, even with its imperfections, is far more authentic than any mask of perfection you once tried to wear. Another sign is how your view of the past starts to shift. It's not about forgetting what happened or sugarcoating your pain with false positivity. It's about being able to look at your story and feel that it no longer hurts the same way. It doesn't weigh you down like before. You no longer fall apart every time a memory resurfaces. When you heal through integration, your difficult moments stop feeling like ever-present threats. They become parts of your journey that you now understand, pieces of your past that have been acknowledged. They no longer define your present. They've been folded into the story of your becoming. Not erased, not glorified, just accepted as part of the sacred whole that is you. You begin to remember, not to reopen old wounds, not to dwell in pain, but with a newfound strength that no longer allows those memories to control you. It's not that what you lived through has ceased to matter. The impact is still there. The experiences still shaped you. But now, you're no longer defined by them. You're no longer imprisoned by the version of yourself that was broken, betrayed, or afraid. You're no longer just the defense mechanism that once built walls to survive. Now, you are the one who has walked alongside every version of yourself, the wounded, the protective, the silent, the loud, and have chosen, with wisdom and love, to bring all of them together. You have made peace with your contradictions. You've chosen integration over fragmentation. You are someone who has seen the depths and, instead of turning away, has decided to honor it all and move forward with deeper awareness. Your past is no longer a punishment. It becomes something sacred, a place where you learned to hold yourself up when everything else failed you. It becomes a sacred ground that holds not just pain, but the roots of your strength. The things you once avoided looking at, the decisions you didn't want to talk about, the moments you tried to forget. Now you meet them with respect. You no longer feel the need to hide them or to feel ashamed of who you were when you didn't know the things you now know. You start to understand that all of your past selves, the quiet ones, the angry ones, the scared ones, the ones who fell again and again, they were never mistakes. They were expressions of your will to survive. They were attempts to protect your heart in a world you hadn't yet learned how to navigate. And now, from where you stand in the present, you can finally embrace all of them. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with the tenderness that you didn't know how to offer yourself back then. And that tenderness does not weaken you, it liberates you. Because only those who have made peace with their past can walk into their future with a soul that feels light, unburdened, and whole. You no longer carry your story like chains around your ankles. You carry it like threads woven into the fabric of your being. Not denying what happened, but acknowledging that through it, your soul learned exactly what it needed to remember. That understanding transforms everything. It shifts how you tell your story. You no longer speak from the wound as if it's still bleeding. You speak from the scar, soft, healed, full of memory, but no longer raw. Your story ceases to be a tragedy and becomes a journey. You no longer define yourself by what was done to you or by what you lost. You define yourself by how you chose to rise, to transform, to grow beyond the limits that pain once placed on you. And that transformation isn't loud. It's not something you shout. It's not something that needs to be explained. But it is unmistakable. People feel it in your presence. They notice the difference even if they can't name it. You radiate something calmer, something rooted. Not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you truly have begun to understand the alchemy of your own becoming. You no longer speak from open wounds, but from scars that carry wisdom. You realize, too, that forgiveness is not always about others. Sometimes it's about you. Forgiving yourself for the times you didn't protect your own heart, for the moments you stayed silent when your soul was screaming, for the instances when you abandoned what you felt just to hold on to something or someone you were afraid to lose. And now, instead of punishing yourself, you offer yourself compassion. You understand that you did the best you could with the level of awareness you had at that time. That self-forgiveness dissolves judgment. It makes space for a new kind of gratitude, not the kind that glorifies the past or pretends it was all beautiful, but the kind that honors what it taught you. You begin to see that in the darkest places, something began to bloom. A seed of awakening was planted. That gratitude changes your energy. It doesn't make you naive. It makes you profound. You no longer carry your past as a burden. You carry it as your root system, anchoring you, grounding you, reminding you of where you come from, but never keeping you from growing. Your story is no longer a prison. It becomes your expansion. It doesn't isolate you. It connects you to others in more real and honest ways. You're not trying to be seen anymore. You're not seeking validation. You are simply sharing your truth. And that authenticity creates bridges where once there were walls. From that place, your past no longer stands between you and the world. You no longer need to hide your experiences to feel safe. You've stopped identifying solely with the pain. Now, when you speak from transformation, not from trauma. And that shift doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you accessible, relatable, magnetic. Because people can feel when someone has walked through darkness and chosen not to live there. Your presence deepens. It becomes quieter, but more powerful. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've become someone who holds their story with reverence rather than resistance. You no longer emanate confusion or denial. You emanate wholeness. And wholeness doesn't shout. It simply exists, firm, radiant, grounded. You also notice that when you revisit your past, it's not to search for blame or to justify your pain. If you return, it's with purpose. It's to gather wisdom, to close cycles, to understand patterns, to consciously close doors that were left slightly open, not as punishment, but as liberation. Nostalgia, when it comes, doesn't overpower you. You don't drown in it. You sit with it. You honor it. But you don't cling to it. Because what once felt like a desperate need now feels like a part of you that has been seen, loved, and gently placed back in its rightful place. And when that happens, something inside you feels lighter. You realize you don't need to reject your past to move forward. Integration is not forgetting. It's the most loving way to evolve. You no longer push away what hurt you. You welcome it as part of your human experience, understanding that everything your soul endured was necessary to arrive here. With this clarity, with this peace, with this deeper level of consciousness. Another unmistakable sign that you're healing and evolving through deep inner integration is when you begin to act from your center rather than from reactive impulses. It's a quiet but powerful shift, one that often goes unnoticed by the outside world, but changes everything within you. This transformation is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about finding a grounded space inside yourself from which your actions naturally arise. When you've reconnected the fragmented parts of your inner world, you no longer feel the need to defend yourself against every challenge, explain every emotion, or prove your worth through impulsive reactions. Your energy stabilizes. Your words become more thoughtful, more deliberate. Your actions start to flow from a unified core, a place within that no longer breaks apart under pressure. You no longer react to life. You respond. And that response comes from clarity, not fear. From presence, not urgency. This is what it means to live integrated. What once overwhelmed you emotionally now meets a new version of you. A version that can observe without becoming consumed, that can feel without getting lost in the feeling. It's not that you stop feeling, it's that you learn to hold space for your emotions. You no longer need to build walls around your heart or lash out in self-protection. You stop confusing hardness with strength. Your power is no longer something you need to assert. It simply exists, quiet, calm, and steady. You maintain your center not by dominating the situation, but by staying rooted in yourself. This center, this inner stability, is not something you fake or pretend. It's not learned from a book or copied from someone else. It's the organic result of facing your inner shadows, of listening to the parts of you that used to sabotage your growth, and more than anything, of accepting them. When you make peace with your inner contradictions, your external behavior shifts. You begin to act from serenity, not from fear, from awareness, not from the need to control. And this change in frequency doesn't just affect you, it alters your entire reality. You no longer need to be right. Peace becomes more important than winning an argument. You no longer dive into conflict just to protect your ego, because you finally understand. There's nothing in you that needs to be defended when you feel whole, and when all your internal parts have been acknowledged and embraced. External conflicts lose their power over you. You become quieter, but your presence speaks louder than ever. That presence doesn't push or impose. It doesn't collapse under pressure. It holds space. It accompanies. It transforms. And it does all this from a place of profound coherence. This kind of coherence isn't theoretical or performative. It doesn't come from pretending to have everything figured out. It emerges when you stop living in pieces, when you stop splitting yourself between what you feel and what you show, between what you think and what you do. Your way of being in the world transforms, not because life becomes perfect, but because you no longer filter it through the lens of past pain. You begin to exist fully, even in discomfort, without being pulled into chaos. Your energy no longer trembles at every provocation because you've stopped projecting your unhealed wounds onto the world around you. You don't hand others the power to unbalance you. Your center becomes your sanctuary, not a battlefield. And that doesn't mean you've stopped feeling. It means you now have the ability to choose how to move with what you feel. You can cry and still be at peace. You can feel afraid and still take the next step. Your emotions are no longer warnings that something is wrong. They're companions that guide you through life. You begin to understand that you don't have to react to everything, not because you don't care, but because you now recognize the value of your energy. You become unwilling to waste it on conflicts that go nowhere, on hollow conversations, or on relationships that only exist in reactive dynamics. Integration naturally makes you more selective, but not from judgment, rather from self-respect. When you learn to inhabit your own inner space, you also learn how to protect it without closing it off. You set boundaries without guilt. You speak your truth without losing your composure. This changes your presence entirely. You become someone who can hold space for others without taking on their weight, who can listen deeply without absorbing others' pain, who can express their energy without trying to dominate anyone. And that kind of presence cannot be faked. It only arises when you've made peace with every part of yourself, when there's no longer a war between your mind and your heart, between your body and your soul. You no longer need to hide your healing process. You allow yourself to honor your pace, to embrace your silences, to give space to your pauses. You stop defining yourself by your productivity or by how strong you appear on the outside. Instead, you define yourself by your integrity, by your capacity to hold yourself with compassion, without demanding perfection. You stay true to yourself, even when no one's watching. And as you continue along this path, you begin to feel a new kind of order emerging within you. Your emotions no longer compete with each other. Your decisions become firmer. The mental noise that used to dominate your thoughts begins to settle, not because it disappears entirely, but because now you can distinguish your true voice from the voices of fear and disconnection. Even your mistakes begin to take on a new meaning. You stop punishing yourself for every misstep. You stop demanding that you start over every time you stumble. Because now you see that each step, even the uncertain ones, are part of your journey. Each one is a thread in the fabric of your integration. You begin to understand yourself more clearly. And in that understanding, you stop breaking apart every time life pushes you into unfamiliar territory. From this deep self-awareness, your strength becomes grounded. You don't need to shout it or prove it. It's there. It's within you. You wear it like a second skin. And in a world that often worships appearances, this kind of authenticity becomes a sacred form of resistance. When you act from that center, you no longer lose yourself so easily. You recognize yourself even in the chaos. You know how to return to yourself without having to rebuild from scratch, because no part of you has been left behind. Every part has been called home. And in that homecoming, your soul finally finds the stability it has been seeking all along. Another powerful sign of inner transformation is when the way you connect with others begins to reflect the harmony you've cultivated within yourself. You no longer seek relationships from a place of lack, but from a place of awareness. You are not here by coincidence. Something deep within you led you to this video at this exact moment, and by the time you finish watching it, you'll begin to understand why. True healing doesn't always feel like a sudden burst of light. More often, it feels like a whisper in the middle of chaos, a quiet murmur that emerges not from the outside, not because something in your surroundings magically shifts, but from something internal, beginning to change, beginning to come together. Healing begins the moment you stop rejecting the parts of your story you once wanted to erase. It starts when you begin to integrate everything you've been, everything you've lived through, everything you've denied or tried to silence. Carl Jung once said that we don't transform by bringing light to the shadow, but by making the darkness conscious. And it's in that very process, silent, often invisible, where the true integration of the soul begins. And even if you're not fully aware of it yet, there are subtle but powerful signs that you're already healing from that deep place within. One of the first signs is that you stop fighting with yourself, not because you're trying to force peace or convince yourself that everything is okay, but because a quiet softness begins to settle in. It's a kind of silent understanding that allows you to observe yourself without judgment, to feel without demanding constant improvement, to live within yourself without needing to constantly fix or correct who you are. Your inner dialogue begins to change. You stop punishing yourself for feeling. You no longer pressure yourself to be perfect just to earn rest. Instead, you start speaking to yourself with honesty, but also with compassion. And that compassion is not weakness. It's a gentle kind of strength that begins to dismantle all the inner walls that once kept you separated from your true self. That softness doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in gradually with every decision you make in your own favor. With every moment you choose not to punish yourself for not having all the answers, for not healing fast enough, for not reacting the way you expected to. You begin to understand that real strength doesn't lie in being invulnerable. It lies in feeling everything and still moving forward, even when the wounds are still open. The internal war that once felt endless begins to quiet, not because everything has been resolved, but because you're no longer fighting against who you are. You begin to accept that you can feel anger without losing your essence, that you can feel fear and still take steps forward, that you can fail without becoming a failure. This kind of acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity. It's the deep realization that every emotion, every wound, every denied piece of yourself forms a crucial part of your soul's map. And when you allow all of it to coexist, when you give every part of yourself space to be, something sacred happens. A silent unification between who you were, who you are, and who you are becoming begins to take place. The demands you once placed on yourself start to lose their grip. The internal judgment fades, and in its place arises a more grounded presence, one that is more real, more firm, more human. You're no longer trying to become someone new. You're starting to truly inhabit yourself. And that, in itself, is already a powerful form of healing. It's a kind of healing that doesn't need visible rituals or dramatic revelations to be real. It shows up in your everyday life, in those moments when you might have once given up on yourself, and now, instead, you choose to stay. Not to fix everything immediately, but simply to stand by your side with dignity and patience. You begin to notice that pain no longer has the same power over you. It still appears, of course, but now it comes with a different rhythm, a different volume, a different texture. It doesn't drag you under anymore. It informs you. It no longer freezes your progress. It walks with you as you keep moving. And this happens because you've stopped rejecting pain. You've come to understand that pain is not your enemy. It is a part of your story that was still waiting to be heard. Your body feels this shift too. The chronic tensions you used to carry without even questioning them start to release, slowly but noticeably. Your breathing deepens without you forcing it. Your sleep becomes more restorative, not because your life has become weightless, but because you are finally carrying your burdens from a more integrated place, a place where you no longer have to abandon yourself just to survive. Emotions that once embarrassed you no longer feel like threats. They have become legitimate expressions of who you are, expressions you can now recognize without feeling the need to correct. You can be sad without thinking you're broken. You can feel insecure without doubting your worth. You can have a bad day without believing that you've regressed. That is one of the clearest signs that you're healing through integration. The ability to hold both your light and your shadow without rejecting either. You are no longer fragmenting yourself to be liked, nor are you denying your truth to fit in. Now, you walk with all that you are, with your contradictions, your emptiness, your quiet inner victories. And that wholeness, even with its imperfections, is far more authentic than any mask of perfection you once tried to wear. Another sign is how your view of the past starts to shift. It's not about forgetting what happened or sugarcoating your pain with false positivity. It's about being able to look at your story and feel that it no longer hurts the same way. It doesn't weigh you down like before. You no longer fall apart every time a memory resurfaces. When you heal through integration, your difficult moments stop feeling like ever-present threats. They become parts of your journey that you now understand, pieces of your past that have been acknowledged. They no longer define your present. They've been folded into the story of your becoming. Not erased, not glorified, just accepted as part of the sacred whole that is you. You begin to remember, not to reopen old wounds, not to dwell in pain, but with a newfound strength that no longer allows those memories to control you. It's not that what you lived through has ceased to matter. The impact is still there. The experiences still shaped you. But now, you're no longer defined by them. You're no longer imprisoned by the version of yourself that was broken, betrayed, or afraid. You're no longer just the defense mechanism that once built walls to survive. Now, you are the one who has walked alongside every version of yourself, the wounded, the protective, the silent, the loud, and have chosen, with wisdom and love, to bring all of them together. You have made peace with your contradictions. You've chosen integration over fragmentation. You are someone who has seen the depths and instead of turning away, has decided to honor it all and move forward with deeper awareness. Your past is no longer a punishment. It becomes something sacred, a place where you learned to hold yourself up when everything else failed you. It becomes a sacred ground that holds not just pain, but the roots of your strength. The things you once avoided looking at, the decisions you didn't want to talk about, the moments you tried to forget. Now you meet them with respect. You no longer feel the need to hide them or to feel ashamed of who you were when you didn't know the things you now know. You start to understand that all of your past selves, the quiet ones, the angry ones, the scared ones, the ones who fell again and again, they were never mistakes. They were expressions of your will to survive. They were attempts to protect your heart in a world you hadn't yet learned how to navigate. And now, from where you stand in the present, you can finally embrace all of them. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with the tenderness that you didn't know how to offer yourself back then. And that tenderness does not weaken you, it liberates you. Because only those who have made peace with their past can walk into their future with a soul that feels light, unburdened, and whole. You no longer carry your story like chains around your ankles. You carry it like threads woven into the fabric of your being. Not denying what happened, but acknowledging that through it, your soul learned exactly what it needed to remember. That understanding transforms everything. It shifts how you tell your story. You no longer speak from the wound as if it's still bleeding. You speak from the scar, soft, healed, full of memory, but no longer raw. Your story ceases to be a tragedy and becomes a journey. You no longer define yourself by what was done to you or by what you lost. You define yourself by how you chose to rise, to transform, to grow beyond the limits that pain once placed on you. And that transformation isn't loud. It's not something you shout. It's not something that needs to be explained. But it is unmistakable. People feel it in your presence. They notice the difference even if they can't name it. You radiate something calmer, something rooted. Not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you truly have begun to understand the alchemy of your own becoming. You no longer speak from open wounds, but from scars that carry wisdom. You realize, too, that forgiveness is not always about others. Sometimes it's about you. Forgiving yourself for the times you didn't protect your own heart, for the moments you stayed silent when your soul was screaming, for the instances when you abandoned what you felt, just to hold on to something or someone you were afraid to lose. And now, instead of punishing yourself, you offer yourself compassion. You understand that you did the best you could with the level of awareness you had at that time. That self-forgiveness dissolves judgment. It makes space for a new kind of gratitude, not the kind that glorifies the past or pretends it was all beautiful, but the kind that honors what it taught you. You begin to see that in the darkest places, something began to bloom. A seed of awakening was planted. That gratitude changes your energy. It doesn't make you naive. It makes you profound. You no longer carry your past as a burden. You carry it as your root system, anchoring you, grounding you, reminding you of where you come from, but never keeping you from growing. Your story is no longer a prison. It becomes your expansion. It doesn't isolate you. It connects you to others in more real and honest ways. You're not trying to be seen anymore. You're not seeking validation. You are simply sharing your truth. And that authenticity creates bridges where once there were walls. From that place, your past no longer stands between you and the world. You no longer need to hide your experiences to feel safe. You've stopped identifying solely with the pain. Now, when you speak from transformation, not from trauma. And that shift doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you accessible, relatable, magnetic. Because people can feel when someone has walked through darkness and chosen not to live there. Your presence deepens. It becomes quieter, but more powerful. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've become someone who holds their story with reverence rather than resistance. You no longer emanate confusion or denial. You emanate wholeness. And wholeness doesn't shout. It simply exists, firm, radiant, grounded. You also notice that when you revisit your past, it's not to search for blame or to justify your pain. If you return, it's with purpose. It's to gather wisdom, to close cycles, to understand patterns, to consciously close doors that were left slightly open, not as punishment, but as liberation. Nostalgia, when it comes, doesn't overpower you. You don't drown in it. You sit with it. You honor it.